We've got some breaking news out of France, which we need to get to straight away.
Yes, the French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu has resigned. This news just breaking across the terminal now.
France's Prime Minister has resigned after less than a month in the role. Sébastien Lecornu.
Now, the clouds of a fresh election are looming large. The newly appointed Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu, believe it or not, has also tendered his resignation, making him the fifth head of government to do so in the last 2 years.
En ce lundi matin, les conditions n'étaient plus remplies pour que je puisse exercer ces fonctions de Premier ministre et permettre au gouvernement d'aller devant l'Assemblée nationale.
Europe's mask is slipping, and this time, even the world can see the cracks. France, the same nation that lectures Africa about good governance and democracy, can't even govern itself anymore. 5 prime ministers, gone in under 2 years. Debt at record highs. Markets in panic. And Emmanuel Macron, cornered, isolated, and losing control of his own government. Before we go deeper, smash that like button so the algorithm knows Africa is watching. And type Africa Rising in the comments to show solidarity, because what we are witnessing right now exposes far more than just French politics. Sébastien Lecornu, Macron's latest prime minister, lasted just 28 days. 28. That's the shortest term in modern French history. He's the fifth to quit in less than 2 years. That's not democracy, that's dysfunction.
France's Prime Minister has resigned after less than a month in the role. Sébastien Lecornu was the fifth Prime Minister and is now leaving the job in less than a month, as he said, and becomes the shortest-serving Prime Minister since 1958. It's actually the third Prime Minister that France has had since December of last year. So his resignation came after he appointed his cabinet and now further deepens the political crisis that's plaguing the country. Alistair Bunkle has more from Paris this morning.
The fourth Prime Minister to have gone now in under 2 years. He actually becomes 26, 27 days he spent in Hôtel de Matignon, the French Prime Minister's residence, making him the shortest serving Prime Minister in the history of the Fifth Republic. And it is a crisis for Emmanuel Macron. There's no two ways about it. He cannot find a way to break the deadlock in the National Assembly. He cannot find a way to get a budget through that is much needed for an economy that is also in deep crisis as well. So what does he do next? Well, you know, I was at the Elysee about an hour or two ago, speaking to people there, French political correspondents and others. The chat coming out of the Elysee and those in the know is that Macron's in something of a sort of dire straits now. He doesn't quite know what to do. I think he's kind of got 3 options. Either resign himself. I don't think he's going to do that. He's steadfastly refused to go. He could try and appoint a new prime minister, but, you know, it's a tactic that is failing time and time again. So unless he goes to the left, to the socialists probably, which is a tactic he hasn't tried before, then I think, you know, he could be facing yet another prime minister resignation in, who knows, a month or 2 from now. So at the moment, the smart money seems to be on possibly holding new National Assembly elections. But even if he does that, his party, at least if the polls are anything to go by, would take a real dropping. I think you'd see an increase in the standing of the National Rally, Marine Le Pen far-right party. So anything Macron does now really is a lose-lose situation for him. He's supposed to be in office until 2027, but he's seeing, and if he makes it that far, he's seeing any legacy he's got being rapidly eaten away by this ongoing crisis. Some people would say it's, you know, he's to blame for a number of reasons. One, because in 2024, he held snap elections in the National Assembly, lost his majority, his party's majority, and ever since it's basically been a hung parliament and unable to agree on anything. So people will point back to that decision by Macron and say it was a flawed decision, and so therefore so much of this is on his shoulders. And then subsequent to that, he's repeatedly appointed prime ministers who are close to him. I mean, take Sébastien Lecornu, young former armed forces minister, the only minister who has served in every single one of Macron's governments. And so none of these characters who have been appointed by Macron have been able to bring the various political sides together to find some sort of compromise. And the result is that they have all failed at every hurdle they've come across.
His resignation sent shockwaves through Europe's bond markets. French debt is now considered riskier than Italy's. Let that sink in. Even Macron's own allies, former Prime Ministers Edouard Philippe and Gabriel Attal, are turning against him, openly calling for fresh elections or his resignation. France hasn't seen this level of political chaos since 1958. Listen to these numbers. France's national debt now stands at 114% of GDP, and the gap between French and German bonds, the widest in 10 years. Investors are losing faith. The European Central Bank is nervous, because if France stumbles, the entire Eurozone shakes. So tell me, family, who should really be teaching who about fiscal responsibility now? Across the channel, even Britain's bond markets are trembling. Yields are rising. The markets smell fear. The same West that once dictated Africa's budgets through the IMF and EU can't even balance its own books.
France's government is on the brink of collapse after another prime minister has resigned, and it could pave the way for the far right to take over. Sébastien Lecornu has stepped down just weeks after taking office, making him the 5th prime minister to leave in just 2 years. And the reason for all of this chaos is because France's parliament is extremely divided between 3 major blocs: the far right, the left, and centrist parties, none of which has an outright majority. And because of these huge divisions, France has been unable to pass a budget, and that's left the country in paralysis. And so this has frustrated many prime ministers who have been from the centre parties, who feel that they can't do anything and they just resign. So now there is huge pressure on the president, Emmanuel Macron, to dissolve parliament and call for new elections so that maybe somebody can have a majority. And if this happens, there is a huge opportunity for the far-right National Rally Party to gain power, because they will be able to take advantage of the frustration of voters with the establishment and traditional parties. And once in power, they would likely implement very extreme policies on things like immigration, Muslims, and the EU. Currently, Macron hasn't announced a decision regarding calling snap elections. However, this could change very soon, so stay tuned for more updates.
But before Lecornu leaves the office, Macron has now urged him to stay on as the Prime Minister for 48 hours more. The French president has asked Lecornu to build a stability plan, and this would involve negotiations with a very hostile opposition. But the hope is to break the impasse, which is pretty thin. The Socialist Party is asking Macron to appoint their Prime Minister. The far-right National Rally is in fact calling for the dissolution of the National Assembly, and Macron's own party leaders are saying that they simply no longer understand his own decisions. The sticking point in the budget cuts is bringing down one government after another. The country's debt has risen to over 113% of the GDP, and the deficit has nearly doubled the European Union's 3% limit. The earlier plan was to cut down the spending, and that has failed to court political storm from the far right as well as from the far left parties. The Macron is 3 years into his second term, and since his re-election, he's seen the departure of a total of 5 prime ministers. The longest serving prime minister was Elizabeth Borne. She remained the prime minister for 1.5 years. Macron then appointed Gabriel Attal, France's youngest and first openly gay prime minister. He passed the baton to Michel Barnier in September 2024. Just 3 months later, Barnier was removed through a no-confidence vote. And next, it was Francois Bayrou who took charge of the office, but he met with the same fate in another no-confidence vote that was brought against him after 9 months. Sébastien Lecornu was the next in line, and France's prime ministerial musical chair continues. But the question, of course, remains, can Lecornu salvage the French government in 48 hours? If not, Macron will be left with 3 very dire choices: name a new prime minister again, dissolve the parliament and then call for fresh elections, or probably resign himself.
But here's the lesson. When Europe sneezes, Africa used to catch the cold. This time, we must not. Macron's options. None look good. He can call snap elections and risk humiliation. He can appoint yet another puppet prime minister, his 6th. Or he can resign. Even French newspapers are done covering for him. Le Monde calls it a tragic farce. Others say, the president is in major crisis. That's not coming from Africa, that's from their own media. The truth is clear. The emperor has no clothes. And the world is finally watching France the way France has always watched Africa, through a magnifying glass. If you believe Africa must rise on its own terms, drop a Africa Rising in the comments, share this video, and support our work with the super thanks. because Afriscope TV is here to tell our side of the story. Disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed in this video are based on publicly available information, news sources, and independent analysis. Afriscope TV does not claim to represent any government, political party, or movement. Our goal is to amplify African voices, educate the public, and spark meaningful conversations on global and continental issues. We encourage our audience to engage critically, verify facts independently, and participate in peaceful, lawful civic discourse. This content is for informational and educational purposes only.